Okay, this is a video about protective netting at Major League Baseball stadiums. And hang on a second, let's just pause it right here. This is Zack Hample talking to you. I went to every stadium this past season, snagged a bunch of baseballs along the way, and I filmed the protective netting at more than 20 different venues. But before we get into that, look at these old awkward photos of me from the late 90s when I first started traveling to stadiums on my own. You can see that there is no protective netting down by the dugouts. Nothing to separate fans from the action. That was obviously a lot more fun, but it was also much more dangerous. And if you fast forward to late in the 2017 season, there was an awful incident at Yankee Stadium where a little girl was drilled in the head by a 105-mile-per-hour foul ball. And that's really when everything started to change. Soon after that, Major League Baseball issued a directive that all 30 teams had to extend the protective netting to the ends of the dugouts in time for opening day in 2018. And that brings us back full circle to my 2018 season. So let's take a look at how this protective netting varies from stadium to stadium with an eye on collecting baseballs. And let's start with Oakland, because why not? So okay, aside from the netting that blocks the seats behind the dugouts, you have these gaps where the two nets meet each other at the home plate ends of the dugouts. Lots of stadiums have this, and I'll talk more about it. Here's another one of those gaps, at Rogers Center in Toronto. Great place to get toss-ups from the catchers during games if an inning ends with a strikeout. So there's the netting. You can see that it extends down the baselines. And let's look up even higher. Hello, CN Tower. And hey, from a safety standpoint, don't worry about the gaps in the nets, like this one at Petco Park in San Diego. You'll only notice that there is a gap if you're in a place where the batter can't hit one anyway. You can see the perspective of it changing right here as I move through the seats. As for the rest of the netting in San Diego, it's sealed up pretty well on the outfield ends of the dugouts. You can see that it extends up really high. No baseballs are getting through that. And look how far it goes down the lines. Ugh. Now out to AT&T Park in San Francisco, where there is a long piece of netting that covers the baselines and extends into the outfield. But look, there's a space underneath the net where players and coaches can toss balls up. Hey, nice grab there, buddy. Here is Camden Yards in Baltimore, which has a long piece of netting that's only about 10 feet high. So you can easily get toss-ups, and you still have to watch out for foul balls screaming into the seats. Here we are at Chase Field in Arizona. You can see there's a really tall net covering the dugout seats. And if you look closer, all the way toward the end of the dugout as we zoom in, there is a gap down on that end. Back to the East Coast here, Citi Field in New York, which has a tremendous amount of netting. There's only one stadium that has more netting than Citi Field. In my opinion, it's way too tall behind the dugouts and not tall enough down the lines, so it messes up the view without keeping people safe. In Philadelphia, you can see as the Philly Fanatic drives by, one standard piece of netting. It really doesn't extend too high up above the dugouts. Definitely easy to get toss-ups over that. Several stadiums have nets that extend up from the outfield ends of the dugouts at a diagonal angle. You just saw that Petco Park in San Diego has that. This one here is Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City. Here's another one, Marlins Park in Miami. There's the net going up at an angle. The nets go up really high down the baselines, and look, there is a gap at the home plate ends of the dugouts. You can see in the background there is an alumni softball game taking place. Good times in southern Florida. Speaking of good times, I think I got a little caught up in the moment. I was filming the dancers here more than I was filming the netting. This is at Herambithorn Stadium in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I was there for a regular season series between the Twins and Indians. Here's a quick glimpse at more protective netting at another international game, the Padres and Dodgers at the Monterrey Baseball Stadium in Mexico. But let's bring things back to the USA, Safeco Field in Seattle. More gaps at the home plate ends of the dugouts. And as I pan to the right here, just take a quick look. I'm going to give you a closer look right behind the dugout here. Notice how the netting is folded up and clipped onto itself to allow a space pre-game for fans to interact with the players. That is how it should be done. And the Cincinnati Reds right here at Great American Ballpark do something similar. You can see that there's space underneath the net pre-game so you can get balls and autographs. I love it. PNC Park in Pittsburgh is fairly standard. There's a tall rectangular piece of netting that comes down in a straight line at the outfield ends of the dugouts. Nothing fancy about that. Same deal at Guaranteed Rate Field, home of the Chicago White Sox. Huge piece of rectangular netting, protecting the seats along the baselines. And while we're in Chicago, here's Wrigley Field. A look on the third base side. You can see a gap way off in the distance, closer to home plate. Here's a look at the first base side during a game. Again, there's a gap on that side as well. But look at those seats right there on the left side of the screen. Those people are sitting in front of the nets. Not safe. There's still a huge lack of consistency across Major League Baseball. Here is Tropicana Field, home of the Tampa Bay Rays. Pretty standard, just a big rectangular piece of netting, hard to see up against the inside of the roof. And okay, look at this insanity right here at Comerica Park in Detroit. The protective netting in this stadium extends a couple hundred feet down the foul lines. This is overkill. I spoke to a lot of fans when I was in Detroit who are pissed off about the netting because they can't interact with the players. It makes it so hard to get balls and autographs, even just to shake hands with them. The locals think it's excessive, and I agree. SunTrust Park in Atlanta has a spectacular gap at the home plate ends of the dugouts. Great for third out balls from the catchers during games, as well as when the visiting team clears the field after BP. Lots of baseballs get thrown right here. And again, don't worry about the safety. The angles are such that batters will not hit balls through that space in the nets. Back to New York City, Yankee Stadium, where the netting is surprisingly low. Given the fact that this was where that really scary injury happened in the stands, you'd think the Yankees would want a really tall net. But nope. So even though there are some gaps, you can expect the players to throw balls directly over. That pretty much wraps it up, but I'm going to leave you with a few more clips of players at stadiums, like Robinson Cano right here in Arizona, looking at the netting, deciding where he wants to throw the ball. He'll find a way, picks out a fan on the first base side, and hooks him up. Here I am at Citi Field getting a toss-up from the Phillies, and you'll see me in a few other clips here as well getting baseballs thrown. That just goes to show that despite the netting, which really does get in the way, it's still possible to get toss-ups. You just have to be creative, you have to be smart, you have to think like the players, and think about where they are likely to throw baseballs. If there's a space underneath the net like right here, Ian Desmond hooking it up, that's how to get one in San Francisco. There's even a gap under the netting in Anaheim. You can see me getting one here pregame as well. Personally, I'm not a fan of the netting. I think it could be improved in a lot of stadiums, but I also think that it's important to help prevent injuries. Whether you love it or hate it, it's definitely here to stay. So make the most of it and have fun watching Major League Baseball, the best game on earth.